Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Story Darlings podcast. I'm Sandra.
And I'm Tara.
Tara, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about the last / potentially not last, we'll talk about that, book in the Ravenhood series, which is called The Finish Line.
Uh-huh.
And the reason I kind of quivered there is a prequel book called The Last Rainy Day, which I think was published after this book, so technically it could be considered the last or the first.
Yeah.
I think you should read it last, though.
I'm excited because, the spin-off series is called Ravenhood Legacy, and so far 3 books have been announced. So there's, as you said, One Last Rainy Day, which I'm so excited to have more Dom time because he's one of my favorites in the whole series. And then there's one for Tyler, which was just announced. Uh-huh.
Oh.
I was like, Tara's going to be all over this. I can't remember who the other book is for.
There's got to be one for Little Dom, Sean's son, as a legacy, because we just got, in the prologue to this book, we see him kind of being brought into the Ravenhood by Sean. So there's got to be, if it's called Legacy, like he's carrying the legacy of both Sean and Dom.
That's true. The Finish Line was such a weird book because where Flock and Exodus felt like Cecilia's books, The Finish Line was very much Tobias's story and his growth, even though Cecilia had a very integral part for how some things played out. This book was very focused on Tobias, and I feel like we got closure for the Sean stuff in the previous book, Exodus, which we covered. And remember when I read the part of the epilogue to you from Exodus that was in the copy I had? And then it was in this one too, right? At the very end. So it's weird. And I looked into this, okay? Apparently, this was originally supposed to only be a duology, Flock and Exodus. And so that Sean epilogue, which is kind of the end of it, and she had planned on either like a short story or just a novella to kind of show the stuff between Tobias and Cecilia in more recent times. But then it turned into like a full-blown book. And this was a long book to me because not a lot happened, but it was a lot of flashbacks, timeline stuff.
Yes. And that was something I was going to say. In the last 2 books, it felt like a lot was happening all the time, right? And then this one felt very much more drawn out because you were experiencing basically 40 years of life in one book, not just 2 summers.
In this book, it opens up and Tobias was like 43 or 44 years old or something. So as you said, there was that huge time jump, and it continues doing that throughout the book. So you have present day, and then it goes back to the past, which was, I think, when Exodus left off with the restaurant and things like that. But then there are several flashbacks from different points in Dom and Tobias's childhood.
So one thing I noticed as you're saying these ages, the Audible says a different age than the Kindle Unlimited book. Like there's a point where like it's in the Audible, I think it says 43, but in the book it says 42 or 44 or something. And then when they're little, it says different ages too. I had to go back and check just to make sure I heard what I heard. And then I read what I read because I listened to it as I'm reading. And when these things don't match up, there were a couple other things like that. Word choices and leaving out like a sentence here and there.
Okay.
It was weird.
I heard the 43, 44 one, but I was too lazy to like dig into it and check. But that's interesting, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like she didn't really know where the story was going and where she was going to take it. And so like little tiny things like that got a little jumbled, but we still love the story.
And I don't think those things affected the story that much because these are flashbacks, and I don't know about you, but I don't remember the exact age I was on any time frames. I mean, if my parents died, I'd probably remember that age. Anything else would be a little bit of a blur in exact ages, so it made sense in my head, or at least I made it make sense in my head.
What were your thoughts on the tone of the book?
It was very much a back and forth for me because you have Cecilia being very pissed off, rightfully so. very pissed off, but at the same time, you have her being so in love with this person that she can't stand it.
All the time she
I
said,
feel
"I
like
hate you."
I feel like it's very real because in a relationship, sometimes you hate them, but you love them at the same time.
Yeah, it's frustrating. The thing about Cecilia is she had all of this growth in book 2, but she put her heart out there, right? She broke off her engagement because she still needed questions answered in closure back in Triple Falls, where she went and was trying to reconnect with Tobias again. And he would just give her the cold shoulder and didn't want to communicate with her and was putting up walls. And now, 8 months later or whatever it is, when he finds her in this other state at this random restaurant, he's just expecting her to drop everything and be on his timeline.
I don't necessarily think he expected her to drop everything. I think he fully went in and everybody around him knew it wasn't going to be easy to get her back in the way that he wanted her back. And I think he fully felt he was going to have to earn that trust back. But yes, I do get what you're saying in that he wanted to be the boss of this
Yeah.
situation.
He definitely wanted to be the leader and to direct how it all went. And it it wasn't going to his plan. The flannel pajamas became like this symbolic
War
frustration.
signal. I also loved him with Bo, the dog, because it's any relationship with a dog with somebody, mostly the dads in the like videos, that didn't want the damn dog, right? And then he, at the very end, is the one who couldn't stand to be parted with the dog. And I think that's mostly for her because she was sitting there crying. But at the same time, he fell in love with the dog too. And he's like, I can teach him how to shoot. It's okay. He can be a part of us.
It was interesting because his relationship with Bo very much was representative of his relationship with Cecilia. Like they
Mhm.
developed kind of hand in hand.
And I love his little banter with the dog sometimes. The text that he sent her about, "We need to look into getting him neutered. My calf is now pregnant."
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh." What did you think about the mom scene?
I loved it so
Both
much.
mom scenes.
Yes, I this is the mom scene that we needed because I just after everything is revealed, I had so much resentment and bitterness, very much like Cecilia felt toward her mom in Exodus, right? When she flipped between Roman and her mom.
Mhm.
And those scenes were so heart wrenching. The guilt, especially in the flashback, that she felt for being responsible for Dom and Tobias's parents' deaths, and then just being the weepy pregnant lady, just trying to take care of them, whether it was the care packages that she would send from time to time to keep them fed and entertained and stuff too, and like shopping for medicine for Dom. Oh, those tugged on my heartstrings.
When she met Tobias in the present slash adult stage, and Cecilia's like, I'm sorry, this was planned before. And Tobias is in his little jealous brain thinking that this is a date she planned.
Uh-huh.
And then it's her mom, and she is freaking out because her mom played an integral part in a very traumatic experience for him, right? I just love how welcoming he was because he had put together all of those little things like the care packages. And I also love how he let her into that part of his life as he's acknowledging her mom and welcoming her mom. I like that for Cecilia too, because she's also had a resentment of her dad is this wealthy person, but they had to scrape by, and her mom worked multiple jobs to scrape by, and she felt guilt for that and things like that. But then she finds out that part of that was to go and protect the two of the men she loves dearly, Dom and Tobias. Now, I just, that whole like interconnected and weaving of their whole lives together was great to see in this book because it was their whole lives from her birth and her name even, which was supposed to be Leanne, and Tobias is like in the car when
Nah.
he's 11, and then her mom doesn't name her Leanne, she names her Cecilia Leanne. And even that was like a quip from Tobias. He's like, "So I had a little hand in that, didn't I?"
I was trying to remember how old Tobias was when he first saw Cecilia when she was 11. You know
He
what
was
I
like
mean?
21 because he's like 10 or so years older than her. Because there was a flashback to the 21 where they were talking about Dom going to the library. So I was guessing thinking that it was right around there that he went to the library with Dom.
Even the flashbacks having Sean just like wild child, messy blonde hair, coming through the window, also has chicken pox, and Dom was like, "Oh, you're the
You're the
culprit."
culprit.
It was so
You're the one who
cute.
gave me this.
I love seeing them. Little Dom was the best, and it just makes me that much sadder.
Uh-huh. So I love Dom, don't get me wrong, but as we see him age in Tobias's vision, you do see him being a little bit of a jackass some.
But we like our jackasses.
We do, but you do see a little bit of that frustration that as you have a kid growing up, like my 13-year-old daughter, that I'm like, I'm gonna strangle you if you don't shut up right now. Like I saw that in Tobias's vision.
It gives all new meaning to Cecilia blasting father figure.
Uh-huh.
Right?
And why it hit him so hard.
Uh-huh.
Because you see a lot of guilt in this book, which you didn't see in the first and second book. Well, you didn't really see him in the first book, but the second book, you didn't see him really feeling too guilty about stealing her love from Dom and Sean. But you
No.
see it a lot more in this and how it broke him to know that he did that to his brother and Sean, which he also calls his brother, and then to not be able to settle that with Dom before Dom died.
Tobias was very much a closed book in Exodus.
Mm-hmm.
In this book, you see it eventually catches up to the Exodus timeline of all the
Mm-hmm.
things going on behind the scene, the threat of Antoine. And so I appreciated how we got scenes from France and him going to prep
Mm-hmm.
school and college, and how he got mixed up with Preston, and then how Tyler got, roped into this in the long run. It was done so well.
I also enjoyed the seeing Tobias as more of a person because before he was like this elevated person leading everything,
Yeah.
great mind behind all of the pieces. And you get to see him in this kind of twiddling his thumbs, waiting for Cecilia to come around and eating his junk food. And there's even one like
Carbs.
quote from him. Yes, carbs that he never eats, and he banned Cecilia from eating when they were together for that summer. But there's even one quip from him that he was starting to get a dad bod because he was waiting on Cecilia. And I think that's to Tyler and or Sean because they're razzing him over his bad mood. And Sean, love him for this book. At the end of last book, I wasn't too fond of him for the timeline of Tessa, right?
Tara's
But
still bitter.
this book, he's back to his cute sunshiny ways. There's a quote from him as he's talking about Tobias and his suffering that Sean is like, you could do worse. You could suffer longer. It's okay. He razzes him about being a whiner because as a part of one of Cecilia's plans, he had to have conversations with Dom to kind of throw him off of the plan. And he's like, I had to have heart to hearts with him, and he's kind of a whiner. I loved that.
I love Sean so much. It was almost like, first off, I'm glad that he and Tobias were able to make up
Mm-hmm.
because after Dom died and everyone went their separate ways, that was heartbreaking considering how much history that they had. But then the fact that Tobias had to just suck it up and ended up resorting to reaching out to Sean for tips on how to infiltrate Cecilia's barrier
Woo,
that
Cecilia.
yeah. How Sean was very hesitant about it at first. I don't know. Sean was still his own person. He's obviously happy in his marriage. He has a life, now a third kid on the way
Third.
that we find out. Yeah. But you can tell that he still has a lot of love for Cecilia and always will care
Mhm.
about her that way too. And I just appreciated that very fragile balance.
Well, and there's a fragile balance with Tobias in that and Cecilia because Cecilia worries about that. She
Mhm.
worries that every time Tobias sees her with Sean, or she talks to Sean, or whatever, that he is going to be worried about something. And she keeps telling him he doesn't need to worry. And there's a point at the end that he says, I know, I get it. You loved him. I'm thankful that you loved him and my brother. And I'm thankful that my brother knew that love before he died because your kind of a love is what I wished for him.
That was one of my favorite quotes right there.
I really adored that. And I also really adored that even though Tobias and Sean weren't in a great place, as Tobias is making, his deals with the president, Preston, who he put in power, right? And Tyler, who is his head of Secret Service now, who he also put there, he is making plans to protect Sean and his children. And one of the things he does is he gets an immunity for Sean and his children if they come into the Ravenhood. So Sean will never have that hanging over his head that he might at any point be sent to prison. And I loved that because that's again the big brother role that he had taken from the beginning of their lives.
Let's rewind back to, I guess, the end of Exodus, right? So Tobias comes into this place where she's working, and then she takes him home, and that's pretty much where this book picks up, is him going home. But that doesn't mean that he has access to her body or her love or her respect. And she's so, I don't want to say mean, but she's definitely very frustrated, angry, treats
I
him
think
like...
she's putting her boundaries in place.
Yes.
She has strong boundaries around what she is willing to give this time around.
And you mentioned Tobias just kind of sitting around. This is domesticated Tobias kind of evolving and just snooping around the house, finds her little list of to-do things where she conveniently put Mr. Handsome on there. And there's one time where he's in the restaurant and he gets to meet Mr. Handsome, who has been coming in like every day for Cecilia specifically. And there was that scene where toward the end where Cecilia's like, I knew who he was the whole time by day 2. It took just 4 days to really confirm it, but I had my strong suspicions on the second day. And it just shows you how far she's come. Like, she took everything that happened in book 2 so seriously with, yeah, my life is at stake. People are after me. And it's really interesting how these people in her past, Antoine and it was Jerry, right?
Because
like how they...
Mr. Handsome is Jerry's stepson, and he is pissed because she stole his inheritance, or what he thought was his inheritance. That scene, I know I mentioned it in the last episode on Exodus, but that scene is where we get the quote that I was talking about of Tobias being very jealous of Mr. Handsome, whose real name is Greg. At this point,
I can't take Greg's name seriously. Every time they're introduced as a hot character, I'm like, no, they're not. Sorry if you're a Greg out there.
So this scene, Tobias is jealous because she has planted this information. She already knows who Greg is. She's not at all interested in Mr. Handsome. Tobias notices Greg trying to ask her out, and he's like, the first time I saw her, she was 11. She was nothing but a little girl, but she was mine to protect from this fucked up world. Mine to look out for, mine to care for. She came in later like a fucking wrecking ball, obliterated the image of the little girl I remembered. I claimed her, then as mine to have, mine to touch, mine to possess, fucking mine. And then he's like, so no, Greg, she will not go out with you. So I just loved that. Like he was so, from the age of 11, she has been mine in some way, and I'm not giving up on that. I don't care what she says. I'm not giving up.
Tara loves those possessive alpha hole.
Yes, I do. The morally gray, I will burn the world down. Men are, yes. We do see Tobias in his, age progression that we see. So we see him as a little child, 11, when he had to become a dad. We see him telling Delphine that she doesn't have to do anything with them, that he will parent Dom, he will figure out how to feed him, he will do all of the stuff. And then we see him go and buy medicine for Dom with Cecilia's mom, which is just a heartbreaking scene because we know at this point what had just happened and how his parents died, but he didn't. And so he felt really bad about taking advantage of this woman's niceness, right? And then he sees her just lose it in the car after she drops him back off at home. And he's like, I don't know what's wrong with that. She's got too many hormones raging. Little boy not understanding, like,
just the gravity of the situation. The guilt.
And then we see him in his prep school with Preston, and then we see him in college a little bit and his meetings with Antoine and building Antoine's army and getting an idea of how to build his own. And then we see him meet his grandpa and play chess with his grandpa and learn from his grandpa about his dad. And then we see him meet his dad and the fear that comes with that, which is the
Yes.
driving fear behind everything and him putting Cecilia away from him and him pushing her, which is that he's afraid he's going to suffer like his dad did. He's going to get schizophrenia and basically torment her. And he doesn't want to do that. And so we see him pushing her away for 7 years. 7 more years from when he comes back. He is not willing to make a complete commitment. He's not willing to make her make that complete commitment because that's the timeline that he has been given for schizophrenia to show up. And then at the very end, he says it's time to go to the finish line. And he proposes to her and they get married because it's been those 7 years and he hasn't fully lost himself. And he's willing to saddle her with him for the rest of her life at this point.
I had mixed thoughts about that. I was so frustrated with Tobias in this book. I just wanted to smack him over and over because just
You and Cecilia
communicate
both.
with her. Just give her your heart. What's she going to do? Just be honest with her. If you're afraid of this mental health thing happening with you and that causing a huge challenge and rift in your relationship with her long term, I mean, just tell her. I think she's a big enough, she has got her big girl pants on. She can handle it. Just trust her.
And he does eventually share that with her.
Eventually.
And
But
that's what
like,
she says to him. She's like, I've
God
got my
damn
big girl
it.
pants on. My clock is not ticking. It's fine. But I do understand how it's so hard for him to share because he hasn't felt like he's had a person to share with before. And so it's a new experience for him to
Yeah.
share because he's always been protecting others from having too much information, from being fully implicated in what's happening, right? And so I do understand that this is him trying to fully switch his personality and it's hard, but I do agree with you. He needed to tell her some things. He hadn't told her anything before her mom showed up, and that was the only reason she got any information at first because he kept telling her to ask him questions. How is she supposed to know what kind of questions she's supposed to ask? She doesn't know. So I agree, but
But
I
you know
can
what?
also see a little bit of devil's advocate in this is a complete change for him.
Yes, he needs to take his baby steps and just go at his own little pace.
But he has
But
had like 10 years, so hurry the
I mean,
fuck
he's
up, dude.
had a long ass time. Like now he's pushing 50. Come on.
Well, no, he told her when he was 30.
Okay, pushing, yeah. Yeah. But you know what? Cecilia had the last laugh because she kept all her secrets at the end too about
Mhm.
luring Antoine and all of this stuff. So,
I knew something was coming, A, because this is my second time reading the book, but I don't remember very much from the first time, but I
yeah.
knew something was coming. And so every time she kept telling him to tell her his secrets, I'm like, but aren't you keeping some? Aren't you? I don't know what it is, but I know you're keeping some.
I mean, she knew he was keeping secrets, and it's like he
Yeah.
just kept flunking her test over and over. And so I love
Mhm.
the way that she just checkmated his ass. It was like, you know what? I've surpassed you now.
I also like how he was the one who branded her and how she threw that back in his face and like a subtle little dig in that you're the one who gave me this power. You're the one who gave me wings. And then she lays out that she had been talking to Tyler and Sean. And with the Sean, she was a little bit hesitant to say because at that point she was still worried about how he would take her relationship now with Sean. But she had been talking to all of them to lure Antoine in, not just wait on Anton to make his. No, she used Greg, fed him little pieces of information because she knew who he was, to go and search for Antoine so that they could team up and they would come back. And then Julian, who was the one that Tobias caught that was supposedly Antoine's henchman, was actually a raven planted to throw Tobias off so that she could finalize her plan. And so he's over here like fiddling with Julian, beating the shit out of him while Julian knows he's actually his leader. And then you also see her getting Paulo, who again, Tobias doesn't even know that she knows anything about, but she's already figured out that Paulo is in love with Antoine's wife, and she can get him to the Raven side if she can give him Antoine's wife. And so she's like putting all of these pieces together of his life without him actually telling her about his life and switching it on him and playing this chess game. I get this vision of he's playing chess, but she's playing like the 40 chess and Big Bang Theory.
Yes.
And she's like working all of these things, and he's over here just playing a normal game of chess.
While Tobias is playing domesticated, I'm getting a dad gut.
Yes, a
she's
dad
she's
bod.
she's masterminding. Even the way that Tobias resorted to contacting Sean to figure out where the fuck Cecilia went, because she left no trace. She put the house in her mother's name so that no one could track her. She didn't leave any kind of trail. And so after months of not knowing what happened to her, he finally swallows his pride, calls up
Tucks his
Sean,
tail.
and Sean's like, yo, I put a tracker on the Camaro. I can tell you where she is. And it was just a very humbling experience for our Tobias.
I think that that is the scene that pulls me back to Sean a little bit,
Mhm,
because
mhm,
you see he still cared.
mhm.
Because at the end of Exodus, I couldn't tell if he actually cared. That is
I
where my, like, love died a little bit, because they had such a deep connection, and to feel like he didn't actually care anymore and it died very quickly was a hit. But seeing him still care, I'm like, "Okay, okay, I can get behind this again."
Maybe this is me being petty, like the petty girlfriend, right? I feel like Sean picked up the pieces of his life, moved forward without knowing like the full context and story, and he realized and had to just kind of eat it and just be happy with Tessa. So in my mind, in my fiction here, Sean settled. I know he claims to love Tessa, like I know this, it says this in the book, but in my brain he kind of settled in life and found peace with everything. So
Yeah,
that's how
I
I
can see that.
interpreted. I also liked how this is just a random flashback scene, but when they all went to Vegas, okay, and Sean was all torn up about this girlfriend situation, right? And he's acting drunk. There's the motorboat scene where he trips in the girl's lap.
I don't think he was acting drunk. Well, I mean, for that part he did, yes, but, like, yes, where
There's
he falls into the dude's lap first and then, like, headbutts him and then falls on the girl and gives her a wink or something. I loved how he sent a picture to Dom and Tobias, because, they were arguing, but then they started laughing because of what Sean did, and he took a picture of them laughing and getting along.
that was legit one of my favorite scenes. Him
Mhm.
sending the photo of them heads thrown back, just laughing their ass off at Sean just doing this.
Antics.
Yes. It
That
just
was key Sean, his
yes.
antics.
It was moments like that, right, that just made you kind of pull back to him,
Yeah,
get all
he's got a
about this.
levity to him that
Yeah.
is much needed when considering Dom and Tobias are
Mhm.
very much not, they're very serious characters.
I'm glad that you brought up Ravenhood Legacy being, I guess, a new generation starting with Dom, little Dom, Sean's Dom, right? Because I didn't put that together like that. There was the origin story for this whole Ravenhood thing that I was so moved by, with
Mhm.
Dawn like wanting to change the rules of how the world works and, put away the bad guys type of thing. And
Only go
that's
to
how
school
this
for 2
whole
days.
yeah, you know, Dom's perfect little world, his version.
People make the rules. We can make rules. We only go to school 2 days.
Yeah. It was just that moment with how Ravenhood started, and then it was the sand dollar scene and breaking it with
Mhm.
like the little doves coming out. It made me so sad, but also happy with it just coming full circle back to
Mhm.
Dom, even with like the weather changing in that scene.
And I liked how you get to see little Dom hating school, but then he grew up he's very smart as a little kid, but then he grew up to be so good at school and wanting to read because that is what Tobias told him. To get smart, you have to read. And so he reads everything he can, and he is so smart. I just love that. Little kid trying to get out of school, and you see how smart he is and how
Yeah.
much he listens to everybody around him and can pick up things.
It was when Tobias was talking about how Dom was as a child and how he kind of saw his own future, right? I just loved how Dom, as soon as he learned from Tobias that, oh, he could accomplish XYZ if he just becomes educated and reads, like he was all in from that moment
Mhm.
on, right? It just made me fall in love with this character again.
I mean, if I had to list my characters of my favorites, Dom would be number 1. Tyler would be number 2 because I think there's so much that we have not learned about Tyler, and I love it. Tobias would be 3, Sean would be 4, and Preston would be 5. If we're rating only the men, sorry, I forgot Cecilia because she'd be up there too, but like the top 5 men.
Ryan. We have to give
Oh,
him a shout
Ryan.
out because didn't he kind of work with Cecilia to bring in, was it Antoine? Or he was
Yeah.
like helping.
No, he helped her figure out who Greg was.
Yes, that's
Because she
it.
knew there was something with Greg, but she didn't know
I just,
exactly who he was.
Ryan,
Ryan.
just.
Okay, maybe he has to go up there too. But my point that I was trying to make is Dom is probably a good amount of people's favorite character, and I think that that just is a testament to the writing about his character because he's not in very much of the first book. He's in some, and in the second book he dies, and he's not in besides flashbacks in the
Yeah.
third book. And so there's very little Dom centric pieces in the book. We have like the first book I would say is Sean's book. It's about Sean for the
Yeah.
most part.
Yep.
The second book, we do have a lot about Dom, but it's mostly Tobias and Cecilia. And then the third book is definitely Tobias and Cecilia. Just seeing the character, even the development, even though it's not in present day development, but the development of that character and the fact that he becomes so entwined, even though he's not there, I think that that is really key for this book because you do fall in love with Dom, even though he's not even there
Mhm.
anymore. And you try so hard not to.
I'm glad you ranked Tyler so highly because I feel like in the Ravenhood Legacy spinoff, we're just going to be so satisfied with everything we learn about him. Even the little breadcrumbs that Kate Stewart
Mhm.
sprinkled into this book with that phase when they were, I think, teenagers. And Tobias is looking back, at that flashback, and Tyler was acting weird and like something was up with Tyler. And it's like we know that there was that time with
Delphine.
Delphine, and I am ready for it. But I just feel like it's going to be so heartbreaking for him.
I hope it's not a flashback all the way. I hope that he finds happiness.
Yeah.
I hope it's not just about his time with Delphine because right now in this book, he's not over it.
No.
He thinks Delphine is his once in a lifetime love. And I hope that Delphine was just his first love. I hope that he gets a second love that's even better.
This
I hope
book,
that he gets a Cecilia after, whatever Sean's person was that he was in love with in the flashback at Vegas
yeah.
that he was. I hope he gets a better love than Delphine because even though he loved her, I don't think Delphine was a great person even back when he loved her.
No, there was the scene where she told Tobias, I think, when he was a kid, that she never wanted to be a parent. And it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, bitch. People are dealt
They didn't want you as
cards
their
in
parent
life.
either.
Yeah. At some point, you need to stop being selfish and suck it up and make some sacrifices, right? She was such a frustrating character. You know that she's the reason why Tyler is so closed off and
Mhm.
okay with not happy, but like just okay. He's okay with everything. And that's not good enough for him. And she's the reason
Mm-mm.
behind that. And this book did nothing to make me change how I felt about her. I just detested
Mm-mm.
her the same
I
amount.
mean, I felt sorry for her in the second book, knowing, all that she had been through. And they kept saying about her really loving somebody and that love being stripped away from her and that changing her.
Yeah.
But instead of doing what Cecilia did when love got stripped from her,
Evolve.
yeah, move on to whatever extent you can, make a life for yourself. She didn't, and I hated it. But also I felt sorry for her dying of cancer. Tyler. But when I found out about Tyler, I felt more sorry for Tyler. So
Yeah.
I hope he gets that all-encompassing love
Yeah.
and realizes that what he had with Delphine wasn't that.
Delphine reminds me of those people that just let tragedy and misfortune turn them into a bitter person, a hateful
Mhm.
person, and that's exactly what she became. And I think it just hits too close to home too, because I have so many family members that,
Mhm.
I mean, they are the Delphines, right? They let a few bad things happen and it defines who they are, and they are not pleasant people to be around. And I just think that's really sad for them. You
Yeah.
have to evolve and grow like Cecilia did. Level up, bitches.
Become the queen that you are.
Yes, yes,
If you
she
can't have a
definitely,
king, be a queen on your own.
right? And then I think it wasn't it Tobias. There was some quote he says he was a pawn the whole time or something
Mhm.
like that. Yeah.
At the end, when he's talking to Antoine, he's like, "You underestimated me because I am this pawn, but this pawn can check a king.
Hmm.
So, bitches."
Yeah. I also liked in this how we got more Christie time. I know it's called Ravenhood, so of course it's going to be mostly about the guys and their fellowship and all of that. But Cecilia still had her own life, and I liked how Kate Stewart depicted how challenging her friendship with Christie was at times. Because, okay, especially as a girl, how many times have you been in a shitty relationship or a very dramatic relationship with someone, and it gets to a point where you're so embarrassed of bringing up the
Yes.
same shit over and over, like you don't even want to tell your besties about what's going on now in the relationship, because you know that they're just sitting over there like, I told you so, you stupid bitch, and rolling their eyes.
Well, and for a fact what their advice would have been, and
Yeah.
you're going to not listen to it. So there's
No,
no
no, no.
point in even talking to them because you're not going to listen to their advice. That's where Cecilia was at the end. She's like, if I call her and tell her this, A, I'm going to get an I told you so when he breaks my heart again.
Uh-huh.
But B, she is going to tell me not to start this up again, to tell him to kick rocks, right?
Yeah.
But Cecilia knows she doesn't want to do that, so she's not going to call Christy and get told this so that she can have this plausible, I wasn't told to do something
Hmm.
different. I also love the friendship on Christy's part and how she is not afraid of Tobias in the least, even
No.
though this description of this dude, I would probably, after standing up for my friend, go piss my pants because he seems like kind of scary, right? But she is not backing down. She's like, "You are shit."
Yeah. The depiction of their friendship was just so good, so realistic, and I just liked how Christy was down for Cecilia like that.
Well, and even after she got told everything, she's still down and she's like, "You're going to protect us, right?
Hmm.
Are we safe?" And then once she was told, "Yes, you've had people on you. We have been making sure you're safe." Because even though Cecilia doesn't want ravens on her, she puts them on her friends to maintain their safety.
On the topic of safety, correct me if I'm wrong, but so this book really, first off, it gave you more about his fear around schizophrenia, like
Mhm.
that happening to him. It also kind of gave you more context about this, 3 times having to check the lock, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
But I don't remember noticing those kinds of behaviors like in the second book.
Oh, they were there.
Were they
Yeah, he
there?
had to check the lock a few times, and then even, like, his tap on his glass being 3 taps when they
Oh, the
called Cecilia,
glass. Okay.
like, that was his because he had this tick so much, that was her way of knowing that that was Tobias, is his 3.
Okay. Okay.
He had to do lots of things in threes.
I must
And it
have blocked that
started with
out.
the lock at the kid because their lock didn't work. So he had to do it to make sure that it was in fact locked.
That scene was even more heartbreaking because he was so worried about Dom waking up and wondering where the hell he was, and just like,
Mhm.
little kids do it all the time. It happened to
Trying to
my
cook
sister.
for
Yeah.
himself. Oh.
He's like, but there's no eggs. And then I'm just like,
So,
oh, they don't have food.
yeah,
Oh.
I had something else on the last scene.
Was Delphine's house in the second book, was that the house they grew up in? Like,
Mhm.
all these flashbacks? Okay.
With the scene with Christy, I would have loved because she had her little boy and he wanted to go ride down the slide. I wanted so bad to see Tobias interact with the child on page because I wanted to see we've seen him with the dog and that, just melts hearts. I wanted to see him with the little kid to melt my heart even more.
That's what makes Tara's ovaries really squeal.
Explode.
Seeing big hunky men with babies.
And dogs.
And puppies. Yes.
So question for you, and did you take this the same way I did? Because Tobias keeps calling her birth control sugar water or something like that, right?
That
He
was so
keeps
weird
like
to me.
he saw it on the first day and he had some sort of like little reaction to it and I think there was even a we're going to have to work on that or something like that at that point. And then he kept calling him sugar water. I'm like, did he like switch out her birth control?
I
But
hope
then
he
you
did
get
not.
but then you get his fear of schizophrenia. Then I was thinking, no, there's no way he would switch out her birth control if he had this fear of schizophrenia running in his family, right?
Yeah.
But then at the very end, we also see that even further because he asks her to stop taking that birth control so that they can have a little baby. And so I don't know why he was calling it sugar water. Because all of the other little clues say that it was in fact birth control that she was taking, unless he was just so good at lying even on page.
I wonder if he just felt paranoid that she was on birth control and not knowing what she'd been up to like the past few months, like if that was like a jealousy thing coming out. Like,
Yeah.
oh, have you been having sexual relations with other people and I don't know it and that's why you're on birth control? I don't know, but
Yeah,
calling
because
it
he
sugar water?
he didn't know what she had been up to because he didn't even know where she was. So
Hmm. Uh-huh. I could see it being something like that. That
yeah.
was such a weird thing to equate it as.
Yeah. I was like, please tell me he didn't switch out her birth control and halfway through this she's gonna get pregnant while he's
that,
still so concerned about her safety.
that would make me just put him at the bottom
Can
of
you
this
imagine
list.
him with a child at that point in time and the safety
Tobias was
shit
such a
that's
hot
going through
mess.
his head? He was in fact paranoid, but I do understand why, but he was so fucking paranoid.
So paranoid to the point of, are these schizophrenic characteristics coming out? I've dated a paranoid schizophrenic a long, long time ago, and the paranoia, my god,
Yeah.
just extreme,
Well,
unbelievable.
and he would lose days, and I think that that was more because of his guilt getting the best of him with Dom,
Yeah.
but
Guilt,
he would lose
trauma.
days. The reason I say that is one of those was clearly Dom-centric when he's talking to her, and
Mm-hmm.
he wanted to know what Dom said to her, and she's like, "When you're sober, I will tell you." And then she finally told him that Dom told her that he has never seen Tobias happy. I think one of the reasons why Tobias is one of my favorite characters, and this is going to sound so stupid, but it is because of seeing him through Dom's eyes. And I love Dom so much, and seeing Tobias through Dom's eyes gives me a little bit of like that rose colored lens.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's necessarily Tobias that is making me fall in love with Tobias. I think it is the way Dom sees Tobias as the father figure, as the person who protected him, as the person who taught him things, as the person who he loves with every fiber of his being, as the person he
Yes.
trusts the most, as the person. I see him through that more so than I see him through Cecilia's eyes.
Yeah.
Because
That's an
Cecilia's eyes, she
interesting.
loves him, but she also fucking hates him.
Yeah, I felt
So
like
that's definitely
that.
not giving
No.
rose colored. But every time I see him through Dom's eyes, I felt a little bit more for him.
That's an interesting perspective, and I wonder if that's why I like Tobias too, was because of that lens that Dom used. That's interesting. Even the lens that Sean thinks about Tobias
Mm-hmm.
now, because there's
Yeah.
such a almost a comedic aspect to it. I don't know, it just humanizes Tobias more because he just seems
Yeah.
so out of reach in Exodus. And then in this book, I just was so frustrated by him and wanted him to get his shit together faster and stop being a
Yes.
whiny bitch.
Yes. Yes. I missed this the first go round. I know I missed it because when I read it, I had no clue what was going on. But Adam's scene where he tells Tobias about Cecilia in the first place, about Dom and Sean bringing a girl in, and he didn't even know who it was. Adam was their fucking narc. And
Oh.
that is Alicia's brother.
Oh.
Adam was the fucking narc that told on Sean and Dom and told Tobias that they had brought a girl in. And then he said, I think Alicia said her name was Cecilia. And Tobias is like, are you fucking serious? Are you sure on that name? And then Adam goes and asks Alicia if she was sure on that name. And Alicia's like, yeah, that's what she said her name was.
And that's when Tobias looks into the past to see, okay, did Cecilia finish up school? Where's she at now? And then discovers.
No, that's when he looks into Dom and Sean bringing the girl in to see if it is in fact
Yeah.
Cecilia, and then finds out that Cecilia has been living at Romans and that these two little fuckers have been lying to him for 3 months. Adam is the reason for all of this.
And Adam died, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In the attack.
Yes.
Or, well, in the subsequent attack. Because Miami came back, and
Just
that's
a big
where
chain of events.
Tobias got shot.
Okay, maybe you remember. Wasn't there some big growth moment between Sean and Dom when Tobias sent them to France? Didn't they look at their mandatory time in France as there was something that they went there with the goal of accomplishing?
They researched Tobias, and they found out about Antoine, because that is how Sean helped
Okay, that's right.
Cecilia in the end with getting Antoine over, is because they had done research over there into all of the things Tobias was not telling him.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, telling them. And Dom had already figured out some of it, but while they were over there, they kind of backtracked for him.
I don't know. It's still crazy to me that Tobias was even that secretive to them, who he's known their entire lives.
But that is what I was getting at with I don't think he's secretive because he wants to be the only one to know things. I think he was being secretive to protect them.
Yeah.
Because there was a point where they even argued over everything was going in Tobias's name, so that if they got caught, Tobias was the only one paying the price. Like, all of their bad deeds were being done in Tobias's name. Now, their good stuff, like the garage and restaurants and bars and things like that, he was putting in their names so that if something went bad and Tobias went to jail for it, they would still have legitimate businesses that would make them okay. So that's where I was getting, I think sometimes in all of his paranoia and all of his chess playing, he wasn't thinking about it as keeping a secret from somebody. He was thinking about it as protecting somebody from knowing the information that could get them in trouble. Yeah.
Another thing that got kind of its conclusion was, I think it was the last book, The Thornbirds kept getting brought up as her favorite book ever, and she started equating it with her relationship with Tobias, like they were the main characters of that story. And so you have dad bod Tobias sitting at home reading this book, just getting very angry and pissed off that that's how Cecilia sees them.
He's like, I'm not your thorn. And then there's even a text that I don't have a fucking church for you to, or for me to choose over you. And it's like, I mean, are you that blind, Tobias? Because yes, it's not a church, but it's your brotherhood that you are choosing. Like, how are you this dumb and making all of these power moves and a billionaire? How?
He didn't read as many books as Dom did growing up.
I don't. But I did enjoy how pissed through the book he was getting. You can see his trajectory as he's reading this book more and more through his text messages to her. And he's getting more and more, like he's losing it more and more and more. And this is supposed to be their date night that he started reading this damn book and it derailed everything.
Speaking of date night, the effort that he put into trying to make dinner and decorating the back porch with like the romantic lights, the fireflies.
As he was losing his shit.
Yeah.
Too. He's still putting this effort in, and he is losing his ever-loving mind over the fact that she views them as this tragedy. And then he realizes that she named her cafe Maggie's after this book, and he flips. Yeah. I like him losing his shit. I think that was The scenes where he does lose it are some of the best with Tobias. When he loses that carefully manicured facade he has.
Yes. Tobias losing control is the most delicious thing ever.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Even the last scene where he's kind of in control, but he's only in control of his planning, and he loses the control to her because she's outplanned him
Mhm.
with Antoine, and even him being so frazzled and showing up, and she's already got one guy dead, and she's got her gun still because she wouldn't let Antoine take it from her. He's like, "She didn't really wanna give it up."
I was so proud of Cecilia in this book for everything that she put into
Mhm.
place. And their house by the end, like their forever house at the end of this in the south of France, just their little estate, a little estate. I just, the perfect little story.
And I love how her place in Virginia is Dom's. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Dom is written all over her cafe and her house, and even Tobias mentions that this would've been where Dom would've wanted. This looks like Dom. But he doesn't get jealous, and that I think that's
That's a lot of growth for him. What did you make of didn't it wasn't it Tobias that said the moment you, Sean and Dom shared Cecilia was the moment you guys lost her because I would never share her.
Mhm. I think Tobias was looking at it from his lens of he has basically been in love with this girl without knowing that that's what it was since she was 11, right? She has been his to protect since she was 11. She has
Yeah.
been in his life since she was 11. And I think you can see his, even when they shared the first girl, he didn't appreciate it, right? He kept saying, "You don't treat women like that. You treat them with respect and whatever." And he kept trying to teach them that you don't use and abuse women. And so I think in his mind that was not respecting her, even though she was down for it. I think in his mind, they each lost a piece of her to the other one.
Do you think when Tobias saw Cecilia in the library when she was 11 that he just saw a lot of himself in her at that point because he lost so much, right?
Yeah.
And had to just
And he was
assume this
basic
adult role and she was kind of going through a similar very not good relationship with
Mhm.
either parent, not a good life experience growing up, and she had that chip on her shoulder, and it's like he saw that and respected that.
And he was 11 when that happened to him too.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yes, I do think he
Oh,
saw a lot in her. I think he saw the innocence that he lost when he was 11 as well, and he wanted to
mm,
protect that innocence inside her. He didn't want
mm.
her to be collateral damage like he was.
Okay, that's looking at it that way. That scores some more Tobias points.
Yeah. I mean, even if it wasn't love in the sense that they get to in the end, because that would be
Yeah,
creepy with a 21-year-old and an 11-year-old or however old he was at that time. I think that there was some love from that point
yeah. There was a
on.
empathy, right? You have
Yeah.
empathy that for that person's journey.
And then when he finds out about, I think her mom's name is like Deanna, right?
Diane, I
Yeah,
can't remember.
something like
Yeah.
that. When he finds out that that was the pregnant lady that helped him and that she was pregnant with Cecilia, I think that without him knowing it, there was a love, even from when she was a baby, in him because he knew that that lady was nice to them. And I think if he would have been able to see her as a baby, he would have felt that same kind of a protection for her because that lady was nice to them and kind of a payback, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's all leading up to all kinds of loves for Tobias with Cecilia. The love of the innocent person, the love of the person that helped him, the physical love that he ends up having in the later books.
That he's addicted
Um,
to. It's like an
yeah.
addiction to him.
And then it grows into the I'm in love with
Yeah.
you part. But there's different, I think he has every sort of love you can have for a person for her at different points in his life.
Yeah, I like that. And then there was just the drawing toward the end that Dom made, the little stick figure family of him and Tobias. And he drew Tobias as just this big hulking entity on the paper and them holding hands. And that just made me so teary eyed.
And he had his mom and dad on there too, but they were kind of in the background because they were in the background of his life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
again,
was
seeing
definitely
Tobias through Dom's eyes, I think was
Yeah.
such a great way to get us to fall in love with Tobias in this book.
Yeah.
Because he lost a lot of brownie points in the last book. A lot.
Yeah, he did.
So
He barely had anything more than sex appeal. There wasn't
mhm.
really any depth to him, and Dom kind of pulled that out. I feel like I need more Dom now. At some
Yeah.
point, we'll read the rest of the Ravenhood Legacy books. I think there's only one or two of them out right now, but at some point, so stay tuned for that. Any final words on The Finish Line by Kate Stewart?
No, but I don't think we gave a spoiler alert, but at this point hopefully people knew that
we just
we just went for it. So if you hadn't read this book prior to this, I'm sorry. It is definitely worth a read, even if just to get more context to what we said, because we just gave a overview of
Yeah.
what's happening.
I mean,
There's so much more that happens.
we mentioned this in the last episode, but this book just feels different from the other two
Mhm.
books. I mean, the pacing is different. It's just more character driven and
Yeah.
backstory and memories. And so, in that way, it feels longer, just much more rich of a story.
Mhm.
So,
You get a lot more of the holes filled in from the first two books, because I felt the first two books there was a lot of gaping holes
yeah.
in what you were finding out. And this book just closes all of those
Mm-hmm.
holes nicely.
Now we just
And
need Tyler.
Cecilia's hole, apparently.
Oh my God. You went there. Wow. Tara's got dad jokes.
They're called
Ah,
mom jokes for me.
mom jokes.
But yeah, I loved it. I think this is maybe one of I love Exodus. Well, okay, I don't know. They're all three such great books for different reasons.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do like getting the answers. So this one has to be up there for me. And then maybe the first one, because I love seeing Dom and Sean in their natural states.
Mhm.
And then maybe Exodus. I think Exodus might be my third favorite. A, because Dom dies and I don't like that.
No. Vlog was fun because you just got to see Dom and Sean be like they were growing
And try
up.
and figure out
And
that boat scene or whatever, raft scene. Is it a
yeah,
raft?
which
Like,
nobody
what
has
the
been
hell
able
happens?
to explain that yet, how everyone's body was situated. That was just the fun book. Exodus was the low point. It's good for wallowing, for sure.
Mhm.
If you're in that
Yeah.
kind of mood, Exodus is good for that. This was more hopeful. So I appreciated that. And Cecilia just masterminding everything was
I would
very,
have
very
liked to see
satisfying.
Ryan on page, not just
Yes.
this mention of Ryan. I want a book with Ryan. I want Ryan to be brought into,
Kate.
because okay, so that could be possible, right? Because she gave wings to Julian and Paulo. So she's out here giving wings. We just might not have read that Ryan is actually a Ravenhood member at this point.
He would be the perfect Raven. Couldn't you just
I
see
know.
him? Yeah.
Like him and Tyler need to not get together, because that would ruin it for me.
Sorry,
Like, as
Tessa.
in my options at Tyler and Ryan. But wouldn't they be like the best of friends?
Yes, they would. Kate Stewart, if you are
We have an
ever
idea for
coming,
you.
if you ever come across this Story Darlings episode, please make a spin off story about Ryan because I want to see
And
his
his
happy ending
Ravenhood
too.
journey.
Yeah, yeah.
I think he could. I think she's used her power that she was given to make some more ravens, because she mentioned that Julian had been a raven for 6 years because he put the marks on her back that gave her the power to make ravens. He
Mm,
just didn't have his marks to throw off
I
Tobias.
like this. I like this. There could
I'm
be something
clowning right now, but
interesting. No, there could be something interesting with Ryan, being an attorney and all of the
mhm.
angles that we could
Going
go.
legit now.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan's legitimately helping her get rid of people, and now he can legitimately help them get rid of people. In that, like, what was it, 8-year gap or whatever, 7-year gap that we have between their last, when they decide they're going legitimate, and the thing with Antoine, and then we jump forward 7 years when they go to the finish line, and they've already taken care of everything they needed to. They've gotten rid of the terrorists, they've whatever. Yeah, we could see Ryan in there helping this
And they
Raven
even
Wings.
allude that things will never be perfectly safe, right? That
Yeah.
there's always some kind of threat out there. Hopefully, Kate makes something happen.
Yeah, I want some Ryan.
He's
That's the
so
only thing that
fun.
could have made this better, is Ryan
More
being
Ryan
there.
Page blues. Anywho, we hope you enjoyed our discussion of The Finish Line by Kate Stewart. More to come on our exploration of the Ravenhood Legacy books. So maybe next year, that'd be something we'll look
Yeah.
into putting on the schedule. And until next week, we will see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.